Today we're going to talk about 9 ways to spice up your training. Good results in the gym require years of unwavering consistency with grueling effort. That's why this isn't just a hobby, it's a lifestyle, right? But all of that white-hot aggression over 2-hour training sessions can start to become monotonous. And like a marriage that's 2 kids past its expiration date, the passion vanishes and you're left asking, why am I even doing this? Here are 9 ways to spice up your training and make sure every time feels like the very first time. The quickest way to get stagnant in your training is to not have any immediate goals that require frequent testing. Some forms of training are monotonous with a lot of sub-max repeating sets, and they rely on hidden math magic to drive adaptation. And as brutally effective as those methods can be, evident by the number of world champions that do them, when every set feels like homework, you aren't likely to get as much out of it. Incorporating sets or progressions that test your limits and give you something to chase can relight that fire. Plus sets are a favorite of mine, which is simply taking your last set of any compound movement for an AMRAP. Every week, your goal is to beat last week's number with a little more weight on the bar. This works best by keeping the working sets in the 5 to 8 rep range with something you can do 12 to 15 reps with. Top sets are another good option as they provide a strength-specific training stimulus and they give you something to chase each week. They also fit super easily with any type of training split, whether it is strength or hypertrophy based. Even if volume is your main goal, starting out with a heavy 3 to 5 takes no extra time and it actually primes you for better volume work via post-activation potentiation. Just make sure you don't chase top sets for too many weeks in a row without changing the exercise rep range or taking a deload. Video can be seen here. Good scorched earth training requires a sense of urgency. Putzing around the gym in between sets, talking to your buddies, or sending creepy DMs to your favorite wellness competitor is a good way to lose momentum and send your training into a death spiral. Remind yourself that you exist with purpose and vigor, not just to take up space, by including time as a training dial for you to turn. A good example of a density tactic is to shorten your rest periods progressively, going from 2.5 to 2 to 1.5 minutes. On lighter exercises, you might go from 1.5 minutes to 60 seconds or less. You can also use high intensity tactics like rest pause, drop sets, supersets, and so on. Density video is right here. The big 3 are some of the best developmental tools around, which is why they comprise the lion's share of training for all athletes. This includes powerlifters, bodybuilders, but also footballers and water polo players. Barbell lifts work, but as any minimalist powerlifter will tell you, running through the same 3 lifts day in, day out can get really damn monotonous. Eventually, you look at the loaded bar the way Al Bundy looks at his wife.
Honey, I bought a new dress. How do you like it?
Well, I don't know, Peg. I'd have to see it without you in it.
Variation is an important part of the adaptive process. The more comfortable you are with a lift, the harder it is to coax new growth. So adding in some small elements of novelty is a great way to kickstart the adaptive cycle while also giving you a mental break from the Chinese water torture that is high frequency, minimalistic, super specialized barbell training. The key is to use movements that serve a purpose. If you've been going heavy for weeks on end with the same heavy lifts, you are due for a period of reduced loads. Try starting your workouts with disadvantage variations that emphasize where you are weak and uncomfortable. On the other hand, if you are a strict rep, full range of motion bodybuilding purist, incorporating some overload movements like cheat reps or partials at the beginning of the workout to stimulate your nervous system is a great way to switch it up. Now this is key. You don't have to scrap your whole workout in favor of a bunch of, hey, look at me lifts. A few small tweaks to your favorite movements will go a long way. While the if it ain't broke, don't fix it principle is an important one, dedicating time to completely unfamiliar organizations of training can spike your interest and involvement while teaching you quite a bit about programming in general. If you fell under the influence of the high-frequency powerlifter camp upon starting your strength journey, you've probably been squatting, deadlifting, and pressing 2, 3, maybe even 4 times per week. Not only is that fucking boring, but it robs you the joy and growth of basic developmental bodybuilding work that used to kickstart the journey of young lifters. Switching to a low frequency, high volume split allows you to revisit those lost developmental years and build the base you never got. It's akin to having a do-over for your lost childhood, except this time you learn boundaries, accountability, and coping skills. Less frequency can also give you a psychological break from competition mode, and it can teach you to love training again. As they say, absence makes the heart grow fonder, so the less frequently you do a lift, the more eager you're going to be to get after it once you see that movement again. Similarly, those of you who are used to doing 3-hour leg marathons once every 7 to 9 days might get a bit of relief by cutting your workouts in half and instead repeating them every 3 or 4 days. You can check out my video on high frequency right here. I'm torn on recommending these because they come with a high risk and are often not appropriate for novice or low intermediate lifters. However, the popularity of these programs and the toughening effect they have on those who survive them have endowed them with the status as a kind of rite of passage. Programs like German volume training, Smolov, and super squats require a ton of focus and effort and build up a huge amount of fatigue. And the result is learning what hard work really is and how so much of what you were doing wasn't that. Remember to keep these few and far between. I promise you they are not viable as long-term training strategies. 4 to 6 weeks might be enough to get you out of a rut, and you can apply your new gains and toughness to a sensible training split. Also, don't go into any of these with pre-existing issues because they have a high probability of creating overuse issues as it is. But what's a little knee tendinopathy in the face of a 500-pound squat? So much of modern training culture is fixated around optimization using specific programming recommendations. Now that's super vital to make sure that scores of greeny lifters are actually doing something productive, but it can also be a restrictive box that keeps you from discovering new methods that might round you out a bit or that you just might like doing better. The best training is the one that you actually do and take seriously, so that's actually pretty important. Many old-timers, myself included, will pine for the time before first-day lifters were trying on singlets and practicing their sumo rituals, where cutting your teeth in the gym meant learning how to grow by winging it. With nothing else for inspiration other than a bodybuilding magazine and the bad advice of the 20-year veteran of your 24-hour fitness, novices would have to experiment with each machine in the gym. They would have to learn how to move and strain in the process. And while growth might be slower in the beginning, the trade-off was a huge teaching effect, which would leave lifters more developed, well-rounded, and having a better understanding of what makes training work. And that primes them to make big progress once they switch over to an actual specialized strength program. If all you've ever known is the comfort of a rigid training structure, grant yourself a 4-week reprieve from strict program adherence and train instinctively. Give yourself very broad guidelines for a split and put more emphasis on the muscles involved than the movement patterns. Resolve to just get some good hard sets in on some exercises you haven't done in a while. Think of it as a prolonged deload. Even if you don't grow in that time, you might learn some things and you will be psychologically refreshed when you come back to the heavy, specific type of training. But you're probably going to grow anyways. We often get so swept up in the big picture stuff that we forget to pay attention to the important details. Adding mass and gaining strength is at the top of most lifters' dream boards, but there are a million little sub-goals that might be vital stepping stones to those broader goals. For instance, super specialized strength athletes might be deficient in smaller muscle groups, like say the size of their arms. Those little pea shooters aren't going to take down that national bench record, so setting a secondary goal of gaining an inch or so on your arms via a lot of curls and tricep extensions will get you closer to that goal while also stimulating your attention with something new. Common goals that lifters should prioritize are rotator cuff strength, basic mobility, bracing ability, ab strength, grip strength, and general conditioning. Each one of those has its own interesting and unique approach for improvement that can add something new to stale training, and each one will make you a better lifter overall. Few things drive passion for training like direct, in-your-face competition. It's great to have a me against myself mentality, but sometimes you look at yourself in the bathroom mirror only to have you tell yourself, let's call it a draw and go get some margies. I highly recommend training in a group if you have the option, even if it's once per week, like on a Strongman Saturday, because the presence of other people creates an immediate hierarchy, and thus, as with all things, but especially in lifting, a natural sense of urgency to climb the pecking order by demonstrating your basic utility as a human. Yeah, I get it. Hierarchies are bad. Except the draw of potentially climbing to the top of one is literally the only reason we do anything above the bare goddamn minimum. Don't fight it with your talking points that you picked up from your comrades at the state college. Embrace the toxicity. Use competition as a tool. Your training will be better for it. For those who don't have a direct training crew to crash, sign up for a meet. We live in a time where a million different federations exist across multiple sports to recruit and cater to brand new lifters. When I started, I had to drive 8 hours from San Diego to Clovis, California to compete. The show had 2 weight classes and no women's division. And that was in a state with 40 million people. Now there are 300 plus US shows every year in Strongman alone, countless in powerlifting, and the ease of signing up for a competition means that there's really no excuse not to. If you're hesitant, just know that no one there is the scary, intimidating stereotype you might think. Just the opposite. They all act as deputized evangelical representatives of the sport, and they will do everything they can to teach and support you in the process. And as every competitor can attest, the second you pay the entry fee, your training takes on a whole new meaning. Volume has to be present in your training at some point, even if it's for brief blocks. But instead of trudging through another mindless 5x10 with the same weight, keeping tight, unwavering 5-pound jumps as your main method of progression, try implementing a variable loading approach like pyramids. Turns out there isn't much of a difference if you do 5x10 at 65% or if you do 10 with 60, 65, 67, 65, 60. Whatever drop there is in total tonnage is made up for with the fact of a higher top set, and the back off sets below it tend to benefit from post-activation potentiation. It's a really productive way to expose yourself to a new stress and break up the monotony. There's a reason that this is a staple in the programming of someone like Boris Shiko, who's one of the most decorated powerlifting coaches ever. 10-8-6-4-2-10 is a fantastic builder, as it exposes you to a wide variety of reps while also building fatigue before the heavy top set. This is a type of fatigue that most strength athletes never experience because they're always trying to stay as fresh as possible for the top set. There's also wave sets, ratchet sets, and chaotic sets. Video for those are right here. So there you have it, guys. 9 ways to keep your training from getting boring. Any one of these would be good training options on their own, but in the face of training that's gotten a little lackluster, you would be hard-pressed to find better options for getting back that spark. Guys, don't forget to check out my website because that is a one-stop shop for all of the content I'm putting out. That's where I feature these YouTube videos. I put them up in blog form. That's where you have access to merch, to books, to news. So check it out, empire-barbell.com. And for play-by-play analysis of my programming, including training footage, go ahead and check out Patreon. I'm updating that every week with a thorough breakdown of what I'm doing, what my goals are, so you can see in real time how I put everything together. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Till next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.